Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramana Namaskaram. Today I'm going to be talking about verses 6 and 7 of Uڵḷadu Nāṛpadu Anubandham. Both of these verses, like all the earlier verses, are verses that Bhagavan translated from Sanskrit. The source, that is the original Sanskrit verse of verse 6 is, the verse is known, but where it comes from is not known. That is, in Sanskrit there are many verses that are well-known verses but have no particular source. So this is one such verse. The next verse, verse 7, I think is a translation of a verse by Adi Shankara. So we'll start with verse 6. What Bhagavan says in this verse is, both of these verses are question and answers. Who is asking a question, who is giving you answers is not clearly stated in verse 6, but the implication, it's a guru and a disciple. So the verse is dēvaṉā, that means who is God? The reply is maṉam tēruvaṉ. That the answer is another question asked by the guru: who knows the mind? The implication is that the one who knows the mind is God. To that, the disciple asks, ēnmmāṇam āviyām eṉṇāl ārkkum. That means my mind is known only by me, who am the soul. Avi means soul or spirit. And then the guru replies, dēvaṉī āhumē, āhaiyāl, ārkkum, śurutiyāl, ēkaṉ, dēvaṉē, eṉṭṛu. That's the order of words in the verse, but to make it intelligible in prose, we have to do what is called anvayam. That is, we have to put it in a natural prose order. So in the prose order of this, natural prose order of this final sentence is āhaiyāl, dēvaṉē, ēkaṉ, eṉṭṛu, śruti ārkkum, dēvaṉī āhumē. What that means is, therefore, since Shruti, Shruti means the Vedas, since the Vedas law, God alone is the one, you are actually God. If you try to explain this a little, that is, the disciple asks, who is God? Guru replies with a question, who knows the mind? Guru is thereby implying that the one who knows the mind is God. The disciple replies, my mind is known only by me, who am the Avi, the soul or spirit. And Guru then says, therefore, since Shruti, namely the Vedas, law or declare emphatically, God is the one, implying that the one who actually exists is only God. So he is one only without a second, ekam eva advityam, as is said in, I think it's in the Chandogya Upanishad. And hence nothing other but, and hence nothing can be other than him. Since he alone exists, he's one without a second, nothing can be other than him. So you are actually God. This is the idea of this verse. This seems to imply that God knows, God here implies Brahman. So this verse implies that Brahman knows the mind. That is not actually the case, as Bhagavan made clear. What knows the mind is only ourself as ego, but the reality of ego is God. So that is what this verse is pointing at. That is, the reality that lies behind that which knows the mind is God. That doesn't mean God or Brahman actually knows the mind, but he is the reality of the knower. The knower is ego. Ego is the adjunct conflated awareness, I am this body. The reality of ego is the pure awareness I am. That is, ego is a conflation of the pure awareness I am and a set of adjuncts, namely this body and all associated adjuncts. So ego is a mixture of what is real and what is unreal, what is aware and what is not aware. That's why ego is called chit jada granti. Chit means pure awareness, jada means what is not aware, and granti means a knot. So the knot formed by the entanglement of chit and jada. Of course, chit is never, pure awareness is never entangled with anything. But from the perspective of our self as ego, our awareness seems to be now entangled with this body, which is jada, which is non-aware. So from the perspective of ego, this body, we are, that is, ego, it conflates what is real with what is unreal, what is aware with what is not aware. So ego is a conflation of two elements. The reality of ego is only the pure awareness I am, which is ever unaffected. The pure aware, even when in the view of ego, pure awareness, the awareness I am seems to be mixed and conflated with this body. It's never mixed with anything. It alone actually exists. It's never touched by anything that appears and disappears, because whatever appears and disappears only in the view of the mind. So though this verse seems to imply that God knows the mind, the deeper implication is that God is the reality of me, the one to whom the disciple, when the disciple says, ēnmmāṇam āviyām eṉṇāl āṛibaḍumē, that N means my mind is known by me, that my me is ego, is referring to ego. But the reality of ego is God. That is the pure awareness I am, which is the real element of ego, is God. That is the deeper meaning of this verse. That is, sometimes the verses, if we take merely the words of the verse, the words seem to be implying that God knows the mind. But if we understand more deeply in the light of Bhagavan's teachings, God is the reality of that which knows the mind. That which knows the mind is only ego. In the view of God, God alone exists. God is one only without a second. That's the implication of the sentence, dēvaṉē ēkaṉ. That means God alone is one, or God alone is the one. It implies that God is the only one. In other words, God is one without a second. So in the view of God, there is no mind, no world, nothing. This is God, not God in the sense of a personal God, but God in the ultimate sense of God as Brahman or Atma Swarupa, the real nature of ourselves. God as in his real nature doesn't know anything other than himself, because he alone is what actually exists. But it seems, from the perspective of the jiva, it seems that God is knowing everything. God is knowing everything because God knows the only thing. But what we as jivas know as all this multiplicity, God is knowing as one, namely as himself. So God is knowing everything, but not everything as many things. He knows everything as the one thing that actually exists, namely as himself. So it's a very deep and subtle point. God knows the world and knows our mind, but not as we know them. We know them as a multitude. We know the world as a multitude of physical phenomena, and the mind as a multitude of mental phenomena. But God knows everything as the one thing that alone actually exists, namely himself. So that is the the underlying implication of the verse. If we just take the surface meaning, it gives a slightly wrong meaning. But if we understand it in the light of Bhagavan's teachings, then it is clear what it means. God is the reality of the mind, which is what the reality of ego, which is what knows the mind. Here, the mind means all the other thoughts that constitute the mind. Ego means the first thought, the thought called I. So all other thoughts that constitute the mind exist only in the view of this first thought. So as Bhagavan says in verse 18 of Upadesha eṇnnāl maṇam, thoughts alone are mind. But all the thoughts, the thought called I alone is the root. Therefore, what the mind essentially is this thought called I, namely ego. That's the implication of verse 18. So often we use the mind in a general sense to refer to all thoughts. But we also talk about the mind as knowing the world, the mind as the knower. The mind as the knower is ego. The mind as what is known is all the other thoughts. So mind includes both subject and all objects. The subject is ego. All other thoughts are objects. The objects seem to exist only in the view of the subject. So without the subject, no objects could seem to exist. This is why Bhagavan often said, of all the thoughts that rise in the mind, the thought called I alone is the first. Only after this rises do other thoughts rise. That's what he says, for example, in the 5th paragraph of ṇeṇṇā. So all the other thoughts that constitute the mind, and the mind, all the other thoughts that constitute the mind include the whole world, because as Bhagavan emphasizes in the 4th paragraph of ṇeṇṇā, the world is nothing but thoughts. That is, what we call the world is nothing but a series of sense impressions, sights, sounds, smells, tastes, and tactile sensations. This is what constitute the world as we experience. All these sense impressions are mental impressions, and any mental impression is just a thought. So there's no world other than thoughts. Just like the world we experience in a dream is a mental fabrication, so the world we experience in the waking state is a mental fabrication. It's all just a series of mental impressions. It has no existence independent of the mind. As Bhagavan emphasizes, for example, well, in so many places, but for example, he says in verse 6 of Uڵḷadu Nāṛpadu, the world is the 5 kinds of sense impressions, nothing else, dēvaṉ, nothing else. The one mind, since one mind knows the world through the 5 senses, is there a world apart from the mind? So the world is nothing but, ultimately, it's nothing but a series of mental impressions. Mental impressions are what are thoughts. That Bhagavan uses the term thought in a very broad sense to mean all mental impressions or mental phenomena. So everything is mental. So when Bhagavan talks about who knows the mind includes all the perceptions, all the memories, everything. So the whole world is included in the mind. That is all known only by the first thought, namely ego. And ego is an adjunct conflated form of the pure awareness I am. The pure awareness I am alone is what actually exists. In the view of the pure awareness I am, nothing other than itself exists. But ego is the same awareness I am, but mixed and conflated with adjuncts, as I am this body, I am this person, I am Michael, or I am Kumar, or I am whoever. So what is real in ego is only the pure awareness I am. Therefore, when we investigate ourselves, what we are to investigate is not any of the adjuncts, the body or mind or any of these things. What is to be investigated is only the fundamental awareness I am. So that is what this verse is. This is one way of pointing towards that. That is, the knower of all this is ego. The reality of ego, that is God. That is the ultimate reality. That is what we seek to know. So I think that's all there is to be said about this verse 6. Verse 7 is a similar verse in that it's also a question and answer. That is a dialogue between a guru and between disciple and guru. Verse 7, I believe it is a translation of there's a work of Shankara called Ekasloka Prakaranam or something, which means a chapter or a work consisting of just one verse. This is the one verse, and Bhagavan translated it into Tamil. So, as in the previous verse, it's a series of questions and answers. The questions are asked by the disciple, and the answers are given by Guru. So it begins with the question, Oli Unu. Oh, sorry, no. In this case, it's not the disciple who's asking the questions; it's the Guru who's asking the questions, in order to teach the disciple. So the first question asked by Guru is, Oli Unuku Edu. What is the light for you? The reply is the second sentence. Pahal inan enaku irul viliku. That means, for me, in daytime, the sun, in darkness, a lamp. That is, the question is, what is the light for you? The answer means, but for me, the light is understood because of the question. For me, the light in daytime is the sun, in darkness is a lamp. But it's put more briefly, it's put just simply, for me, in daytime the sun, in darkness a lamp. And then the Guru asks another question, which is, Oli Una Oli Edu. That means, what is the light but knows the light? And the answer given by the disciple is kan. Kan means eye. Eye means organ of sight. Not the pronoun I, but the noun I, EYE. And then the Guru asks, Adu Una Oli Edu. What is the light but knows that? That means that knows the eye. And the disciple answers, Oli Mati. That is, the light is the mind. And then Guru asks again, Mati Una Oli Edu. What is the light but knows the mind? And the disciple answers, Adu Aham. That is I. And the Guru then concludes by saying, Oli Tanil Olium Ni. That is the light in light is you. But this reply of Guru is part of a sentence. That is, the whole of the final sentence is Oli Tanil Olium Ni Ena Guru. When Guru said that, when Guru said the light but in light, that means the light in all lights, the light that knows the light. Yes, actually, that knows is not there, but it's implied there. Oh, sorry. No, the Guru says the light in light is you. Yeah, that the Guru replies, the light in light is you. When Guru says that, the disciple understands aham adai. I am that. So the whole of the last sentence is Oli Tanil Olium Ni Ena Guru Aham Adai. That means when Guru said, the light in light is you, I am that alone. The implication is the disciple replied, I am that alone. So if we expand it a little, the Guru asks, what is the light for you? The disciple answers, for me in daytime the sun, in darkness a lamp. Guru then asks, what is the light that knows or is aware of the physical light from such sources? That is, what is the light but knows the light, he says, but that implies what is the light but knows such physical, that is, the light of the sun and the light of a lamp are physical lights. So what is the light but knows those physical lights? And the disciple replies, the eye. And Guru then asks, what is the light that knows or is aware of that? That is, what is the light but knows the mind, the eye? And the disciple answers, the light is mind. That means the light but knows the eye is mind. And Guru then asks, what is the light that knows the mind? And disciple replied, that is I. And then when Guru said, the light in light, namely the light of awareness, which is what shines in all lights, illumining them or making them known, is you. And then the disciple says, I am that alone, or I am that indeed. This dialogue is a little similar to, well, it's similar in implication to what is explained in Drisya Viveka. In Drisya Viveka, that's a Sanskrit work by Adi Shankara, Bhagavan translated into Tamil. Drik means the seer, Drisya means what is seen, and Viveka means distinguishing. So distinguishing the seer from the seen. So it begins with this in a similar way. What is the I can't remember exactly how it's worded in Drisya Viveka. But what is it that knows the world, the eye? What is it that sees? That sees, meaning what sees objects, the eye. What is the eye? What is it that sees the eye? The mind. What is it that sees the mind? That is Atman. That is the ultimate seer. Atman there means actually, no, when he says that is Atman, Atman actually means ego in that context. But then we have to go further back within. If ego investigates itself, then we come to the ultimate reality. So ego is not the ultimate reality, but within ego is the ultimate reality. So only when ego turns its attention back on itself to see who am I, will it find the ultimate reality. But anyway, all these are various ways in which our attention is to be drawn back to ourselves. That is, the nature of the mind is to flow outwards, to be constantly seeing other things, constantly knowing other things. We know, we see other things by means of light. We hear other things by means of vibrations in the air, and so on and so forth. But what is it that, so it's through the senses that we know all these things. But what is it that knows through the senses? That's what's referred to here, the light that knows that, the light that knows the mind. That here, light is a metaphor for awareness. So though it starts off with the physical light, once Guru asks, what is the light that knows that? Meaning, what is the light that knows the mind? Their light means awareness. So the awareness that knows the eye is the mind. And what is the light? What is the awareness that knows the mind? That is I. And therefore, you are the light in all lights. In other words, the ultimate light is we ourselves. That is what we actually are, is the light of pure awareness. Pure awareness is what is always shining as I am. So pure awareness is what shines in the mind, giving light to the mind. As Bhagavan says in verse 20 of Uڵḷadu Nāṛpadu, sorry, not verse 20, I mean verse 22. Mati Koli Tandu. That means giving light to the mind, Matikul Olirum, which shines within the mind. Then we have to change the order slightly to make sense of it. Matikul Olirum, Patiyal. Pati means the Lord. Matiyine Ulle Madaki. Padacchēdam Andri. That means except by turning the mind back within, completely immersing it in God, who shines within that mind, giving light to the mind. How to fathom God by the mind? That is, God is the ultimate light, the light of pure awareness, that shines within the mind, giving light to the mind. So in order to know him as he actually is, and he here means he is what we actually are. So in order to know him as we actually are, which means knowing ourselves as we actually are, we need to turn our mind back within to know the light that shines within the mind, giving light to the mind. That light is the light of pure awareness. So the same is what is referred to here in this 7th verse of Uڵḷadu Nāṛpadu Anubandham. That when he says the light that knows the mind, that is it. The disciple replies, "That is I." And the Guru says, the light in light is you. That means you are the ultimate light. But again, here, we need to understand this a little bit more deeply in the light of Bhagavan's teaching, because what knows the mind is I, in the sense of ego. Ego is not the ultimate light. Ego borrows its light from the pure awareness I am, but always shines within it. So the Lord, Pati, that Bhagavan refers to in verse 22 of Uڵḷadu Nāṛpadu, is our own real nature, which is the pure awareness that always shines within us as I. So what knows the mind is ego, the adjunct conflated awareness, I am this body, but the reality of ego is the pure awareness I am. So all these, that is this verse 6 and verse 7, are both intended to turn our attention back towards ourselves, because only when we turn our attention back towards ourselves will we see that what we actually are is not this ego that knows the world and knows the mind, but only the pure awareness I am, which is the reality that underlies ego. That is, ego is the adjunct mixed awareness I am this body. The pure awareness I am, which is the reality of ego, what ego actually is. But so long as we're looking outwards, we seem to be ego, this adjunct conflated awareness I am this body. When we look back within, there's no such thing as ego to be found. All we will find is pure awareness. Just like a rope seems to be a snake only when we don't look at it carefully enough. If we look at it carefully enough, we will see, oh, it's not a snake, it's just a rope. Likewise, if we look at ego carefully enough, in other words, if we look at ourselves carefully enough, we will see, oh, we are not ego, this adjunct conflated awareness. We are just the pure awareness I am. It's only in the view of this adjunct conflated awareness that the mind and world seem to exist. But when we turn within and see ourselves as the pure awareness that we actually are, ego will thereby be dissolved, and everything that was known by ego, in other words, its whole world appearance, will disappear along with it. Because as Bhagavan says in verse 26 of Uڵḷadu Nāṛpadu, if ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. If ego doesn't exist, everything doesn't exist. Why is that? Because everything meaning all phenomena, both mental phenomena and what seem to be physical phenomena, all exist only, or all seem to exist only in the view of ego. So they have no existence independent of ego. So when we rise as ego, we see all this multiplicity. When we subside back into the heart, cease rising as ego, all multiplicity disappears, and what remains is the one that actually exists, namely the pure awareness I am. So these verses are intended to turn our attention back towards ourselves in order to make us look deep within to see what we, the light that illumines the mind, actually are. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramana. I hope I've explained that clearly enough.
Thank you, Michael. So I will ask the questions on this. So the first question is from Meera. Since Satchit is subtler than the mind ego cannot perceive the Satchit like the ego perceives objects and worlds, isn't it? So, the only way the mind can look within inward is only when it gains knowledge of something beyond what it can perceive, the truth of ego itself, by way of knowledge, isn't it? So that sentence is not making
No,
sense to
I
me.
understand, but
Okay.
that is,
Let me finish
it depends what we, okay.
Yeah, I want to go ahead and finish the rest of the question. Even on start of the journey of looking within, I mean, or the mind ego continues looking outward, thinking world to be the reality, isn't it? So, Meera, do you want to add anything more to what you just mentioned on the post?
No, basically just that. So in order for the journey to start to look within, the mind should know there is something else out there, its own truth, and the knowledge about the truth. Only then it's going to look within, because the mind's job is it looks outward using the sense organs. It perceives the world. So even to look within, it should know there's something better than world. There is something full of joy, something more permanent joy than periodic spurts of joy. Only then it'll even start the journey to look within, so to understand the nature of the Satchit, to understand what that Satchit is, truth is. That will be the motivating factor. Like mind is like learning, right? It's a learning tool. I mean, just my thought.
Yeah, okay. That is, in order to turn within, two things are necessary. First, we need to understand what is meant by turning within. Turning within means turning our attention back towards ourself. And we need to understand what we mean by ourself. Ourself doesn't mean this body or mind or anything. It means just the fundamental awareness I am. So we need to understand that because otherwise, if we don't understand that, when we try to investigate ourselves, we'll be investigating something other than ourselves. All we are to investigate is this fundamental awareness I am, because that is what we actually are. So we need to understand that. We also obviously need to be motivated. That is the nature of the mind, as you say, is to be always going outwards. So we need motivation to turn within. Plenty of motivation is given by the world itself. The world gives us plenty of blows. And further motivation is given by Bhagavan's teachings, but tells us, that points out to us the obvious fact, but when we come out, we have to face the world and receive all the blows. So if we want to be free of all this trouble that results from our rising as ego, we need to turn back within. We are not knowing. It's when you say, but we need to know there is something beyond. That is, what is to be known, we all already know. All that is to be known is I am. We already know I am. The problem is, though we know I am, we don't know I am means ourself. Though we know ourselves, we don't know ourselves as we actually are, because we mistake ourselves to be a body. So as Bhagavan often said, there is no new knowledge to be attained. If we attained a new knowledge, whatever comes newly will go. Whatever comes has to go. Because whatever comes is impermanent. What is permanent must always be there. So the one true knowledge, the pure jnana, pure awareness, is ever clearly shining and known by everyone as I am. The problem is, instead of knowing ourselves as just I am, we know ourselves as I am Meera, I am Michael, I am this person, I'm that person. That false awareness, I am this or I am that, that is ego. So that false awareness is to be removed. If the false awareness is to be removed, what remains is the one real awareness. So how to remove this false awareness? The false awareness is a false identification. Because we're looking outwards, we know ourselves as I am this body. In order to remove this false knowledge, I am this body, we need to know what we actually are. If we see a rope and mistake it to be a snake, the snake is a false knowledge. To remove that false knowledge, the only way you can remove that false knowledge is by gaining correct knowledge. What is it that actually, it seems to be a snake, but what actually is it? If we look at it carefully enough, we see, oh, it's just a rope. Likewise, if we as ego look at ourselves carefully enough, we will see we are not ego, we are just pure awareness. As soon as we see ourselves as pure awareness, ego, the false awareness, I am this person, I am Miro, I am Michael, or I am whoever, that is destroyed. And what remains is just the pure awareness I am, but always knows itself as just I am I. Not I am this or I am that, but I am just I am, nothing other than myself.
Yeah, that's what I meant, like knowledge in the sense to know that I am is the truth.
Yes. We need to have an understanding of that.
That's what I meant by knowledge.
This is why the external guru is necessary. If Bhagavan, that is, when Bhagavan points these things out to us and we think about it, it becomes very obvious to us what he is saying is true. But if he hadn't pointed it out to us, we would have been overlooking this. We've been overlooking this for endless. So Bhagavan just points out what is obvious. But because our mind is going outwards, the very nature of the mind is to overlook this obvious reality. So it's necessary for our own self, our own reality, to appear outwardly in name and form as Guru to tell us to turn within.
So we have to teach. So should we not tell the mind that what we see outward is not the reality? Or, I mean, is that's a teaching, right?
Yes. It's good to remind ourselves of these things, but we cannot know the reality but just by telling ourselves these things.
At least we won't take it seriously, like how we don't take dreams seriously.
That is, the more we turn within, the less weight we will give to this world, the less weight we will give to our existence as this body. So we gradually gain detachment, vairagyam. We develop an udasina bhava, an attitude of indifference to all these things.
But as long as the body is alive, we have to use our skill sets or whatever for our bread and butter, for our livelihood. We make use of the unique thing, right?
We don't have to do anything, because this body, the prarabdha that was allotted for this body at the moment it came into existence, that prarabdha is going to unfold. We think we have to do it because we take ourselves to be this body. What we have to do is not take ourselves to be this body, not feel I have to take care of this body. What we have to do is to surrender this body and mind to Bhagavan. How can we surrender it to Bhagavan? By turning within and holding on to him in our heart, because he is what is always shining in our heart as I. If we surrender ourselves in this way, whatever the body and mind need to do, he will make them do. Even if we don't surrender ourselves, he will still make the mind and body do whatever they're meant to do. But we suffer along the way because we are seeking this and that, and we don't get what we want, and we're dissatisfied, and we get so many things that we dislike. But if we turn within, what does it matter whether good things, so-called good things or so-called bad things happen in our life? We are indifferent to them, because all that is real, all that really matters is that pure awareness I am that is shining in our heart, which is what we actually are and what Bhagavan actually is.
So is it wrong for me to think like when I do my work, I mean, again, it's the ego talking then, when I'm doing the work. Whenever I do any activities, I always feel gratitude to that truth within me, because of which this body, mind is even alive, exists, which is because, we're just doing all these activities. But without the truth within, this is not even possible. So an emotion of an attitude of gratitude comes into my mind. Is that okay?
That's okay at a certain level, but we need to think even deeper than that.
Okay.
Why should we think doing all these things is somehow something of value? But we seem to be doing these things only because we take ourselves to be the body. So ultimately, all these things are not because of that awareness I am, it's because of ego. Of course, there couldn't be ego without that awareness I am.
Right, right.
But ego is the culprit for, what causes the appearance of all these other things is ego. So we need to go deeper within.
Okay, thank you.
The one thing we need to be grateful to Bhagavan for is not for enabling us to do this or that. We need to be grateful to him for one thing and one thing alone, forever shining in our heart as I. Because if we're grateful to him for that, our mind will be going inwards. If we're grateful for him for the trivial things that we experience in this life, our mind will be going outwards. So the true gratitude to Bhagavan is turning within.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael.
Right.
So Michael, so this next is not a question, it's just a comment. Knowledge of Bruce's comment, knowledge of self is not gained. Outward sight covers self and therefore obscures the inward sight.
Yeah, nothing ever covers self actually, because even when we're looking outwards, we're aware I am. But there is a seeming covering because we take more interest in the external world than we take in ourself, in our own being. So we can remove that seeming covering only by developing more and more love to attend to ourself alone. The more we love to attend to ourselves alone, the clearer it will be. But that is never covered. It only seems to be covered so long as we're looking outwards. But even when we're looking outwards, it's only by that light, by the light of that awareness I am, but we're able to know all these other things.
Right. Thank you, Michael. Rabbi Day makes a comment. The thought that from time to time reminds us to look inwards is the grace of the Guru.
Yes, certainly.
Then Sandy.
But we shouldn't. Grace of Guru is not limited to that thought, because if that thought alone were the grace of Guru, then that would mean grace of Guru is very intermittent, because we remember to turn within only intermittently. What is really the grace of Guru is the love to turn within. And that love is there in our heart, but we have to look within to see that love in ourselves. So long as we're looking outwards, we overlook the love that Bhagavan has already given us to look within.
Thank you, Michael. Sandy makes a comment. Would you talk about the first I thought and when it arises? And when does the identification take place? And what identifies with the body?
The rising of the I thought, that is ego. The rising of ego and the identification with the body are simultaneous. As Bhagavan says in verse 25 of Uڵḷadu Nāṛpadu, grasping form, it comes into existence. That as soon as we rise as ego, we project and grasp the form of a body as I am this body. So this happens all simultaneously. It's the very nature of ego to project and grasp a body as I. So we cannot rise as ego without grasping a body as I. We cannot stand for a moment as ego without grasping a body as I. Does that adequately answer Rabbi Day's question?
Sandy?
Sandy.
Yeah, not right away, but I will think about what you have told.
Yes.
Thank you.
It's all simultaneously. That is the very nature of ego.
The very nature of ego is identification with the body.
Yeah.
But
no body exists independent of ego. So the nature of ego, as soon as we rise as ego, we project the body and take it to be I.
Right.
Just like in dream. But in dream, we always experience ourselves as a dream body, a body in that dream world. But that body in the dream world doesn't exist before we start dreaming. As soon as we rise as ego in a dream, we project the dream body, take it to be I, and through the five senses of that dream body, we project a dream world.
Satchit
So,
exists independently, right? Ego does not exist independently, right?
right.
Okay.
That is, Satchit is independent because it alone is what always exists. Whether other things appear or not, Satchit is always remains as it is. So it's untouched by anything. Ego is dependent on two things. Firstly, most importantly, it's dependent on Satchit. Because without Satchit, it couldn't. Satchit is the I am element in this conflated awareness, I am this person. And ego is also dependent on whatever body it projects. And it's dependent on all the other things it experiences because that's the food on which it's living. But those other things are also dependent on ego because they don't exist at all independent of ego. So ego projects all this dream and feeds upon it, because without this dream body and dream world, ego, we couldn't rise as ego. So though the dream body and dream world do not exist independent of ego, ego is the very nature of ego to project these things. If we didn't project these things, we would remain as the pure awareness I am. One other thing, Sandy, you asked is, what is it that grasps all these things? We can only say it's ego. Ego is what grasps this body, what projects and grasps this body as I. But what is this ego? If, in order to see what ego is, we need to turn our attention back within. We need to turn our attention away from the world and the body and everything else, back towards ourselves to see who am I. When we turn our attention within, no such thing as ego will be found. What we will find is just pure awareness. Just like the rope seems to be a snake only so long as we don't look at it carefully enough. If we look at it carefully, if we look at the snake carefully, what do we see? Oh, there is no snake at all. It's only a rope. Likewise, if we look at ego carefully enough, we see, oh, there's no such thing as ego at all. What seemed to be ego is just pure awareness. But of course, analogies have their limitation. In the case of the snake and the rope, both the rope and the seeming snake are both objects. But in the case of ego, ego is not an object, it's the subject. But we seem to be ego so long as we're looking outwards. If we look back within to see who am I, no such thing as ego is to be found. So what is it that has grasped all these things? If there's no ego, then what has grasped this body as I? And what has grasped all these phenomena in the world as I am aware of this, I know that? When ego is absent, all these other things are absent. So by looking deep within to see what we actually are, we will unravel this knot called ego, this Uḷḷadu Granthi. And when we unravel this knot, everything else is unraveled. And what remains is just what always actually exists, namely I am.
Thank you, Michael.
Right.
Thank you, Michael. So Sarah asked a question. The trouble with seeing myself as anything is that I need to see a form, a face, or even pure air. When investigating our true nature, is it counterproductive to think of light or an apparition, even thin air? I also find Bhagavan's form to be a source of comfort, and I can't practice without the image of his physical form in my mind. Is that a natural phenomena for someone more inclined towards bhakti?
It is natural for us to have love for the outward form of Bhagavan, because Bhagavan has appeared in that outward form in order to give us these precious teachings. But the very purpose of his appearing in that outward form is to tell us to turn within. So naturally, when our mind is going outwards, we feel love for the outward form of Bhagavan. But Bhagavan is constantly reminding us, Ariyati tara jivara dahavari jagohil, arivairami paramatman Aruṇāchala Ramaṇan. Aruṇāchala Ramana is the Paramatman that blissfully exists as awareness in the cave of the heart lotus of all jivas, beginning with Hari. So he is that which is always shining in our heart as awareness. Awareness means the pure awareness I am. So if we really have love for him, we shouldn't be just, we shouldn't be content merely with meditating on his outward form, because the purpose of that outward form is to turn our mind within. So if we truly love him, we should follow what he says, to look in our heart, to see him in our heart, to see him as ourself. And we can see him as ourself only by keenly attending to ourselves to see what we actually are. What we actually are is what Bhagavan actually is. So we cannot know Bhagavan without knowing ourselves. So the purpose of the outward form is to tell us to turn within. So it's natural for us to love that outward form, but if our love for that outward form is clear and pure love, it will prompt us to turn our attention within. This is what Bhagavan sings in the second half of that verse, that Aruṇāchala Ramaṇan verse, where he says in the first half, but Aruṇāchala Ramaṇan is the Paramatma, but blissfully exists as awareness in the cave of the heart lotus of all. In the second half of that verse, he says, Paribal ulam uruha. That means heart melting with love. Nal paranandidu guhayandu. Reaching the cave where that null paran, that benign supreme dwells, paranandidu guhayandu. Arivam viri tēruva, the eye of awareness opening, nijam arivai, you will know this. Aduvelayam, aduvelayam literally means it will come out. In other words, it will reveal itself. So, but Bhagavan doesn't only tell us what he actually is, he is that which is shining in our heart as the awareness I am. How to know him as such? We need to turn within with our heart melting with love. That's very, very important. He begins the second half of that verse with the word parival, by love. What is the result of that love? If the true love is there, the heart will melt with love. And then only when the heart is truly melting with love, will we be able to go deep enough within in order to see him in our heart as ourself.
Thank you, Michael. I was afraid you were going to say that.
Yeah.
It's just
why should you be afraid? This is what Bhagavan's teachings are all about. Why should we be afraid of Bhagavan's teachings?
Well, I mean, his form is, I mean, there's such a pull. And yes, as humans, we need that. We need a face, a form, I don't know what's the right word.
As a human, you need a face and a form. But are you human? That's what Bhagavan is asking you. Are you the body?
Yeah.
So long as you're aware of yourself as I am this body, you seem to be human. You are not human.
Yes, human like I said, it's much easier to.
Human is a biological species. You are something far, far greater than that. As you will see if you look within. That's why Bhagavan appeared in this outward name and form, to tell us to look within.
Thank you.
We are all reluctant to look within because we are not willing to surrender ourselves wholly to Bhagavan. If we truly had love for Bhagavan, if we truly had heart-melting, all-consuming love for Bhagavan, we would be willing to turn within and thereby to be swallowed by him. But because we're not yet willing to surrender ourselves completely, to allow him to swallow us, we finding every excuse possible to go outwards. But the longer we continue finding excuses to go outwards, the longer we are dragging this on. He has appeared outwardly to speed up this process. So if we really are grateful to him, if we really appreciate what a great treasure he's brought for us, we will turn within. If we truly love him, we will be willing to give ourselves wholly to him. And we can give ourselves wholly to him only by turning within. That is true surrender. That's what he says in the first sentence of the 13th paragraph of ṉeṉṇā. Anma chintane tavira, vera chintane kalamba vitaku, satram idam kodamal, apmanishta paranai iripade, tanne isanaku alipadam. That means being apmanishta param, one who's firmly established as oneself, not giving the slightest room for rising of any thought other than atmachintana, other than thought of oneself, in other words, other than self-attentiveness. That alone is giving oneself to God. So if we really love him, we should want to give ourselves to him. If we really want to give ourselves to him, this is the only way.
Yeah.
So we shouldn't be afraid of his teachings. We should embrace his teachings. Though embracing his teachings is signing our own death warrant, we should nevertheless embrace them, because our death is what is ultimately the only solution. Death means death of ego. It's the only solution to all these problems. When ego dies, what remains is Bhagavan alone, as he always actually is.
I wanted to ask, Michael, what does self-inquiry look like for you? When you sit down to practice, what's your process? I know it's kind of difficult to explain.
It is not like anything. What is I am like? We all know I am. Can we describe I am? Can we say what I am is like? I am is not like anything. It is peerless. It's unequaled. It's something that cannot be compared with anything, because all things are objects.
So do you make time in the day to sit down, or is it more walking meditation or walking sort of self-inquiry on?
But it doesn't. Self-inquiry has got nothing to do with walking, talking, sitting, standing. It has got nothing to do with body. It is all about turning the mind back within. So it doesn't matter whether the body is walking or sitting or lying or whatever it may be doing. But one thing, whatever the body may be doing or not doing, the one thing we are always aware of is I am. All we need to do is to hold on to that I am, unmindful of the body. Let the body walk, let it talk, let it do anything. Our concern should be holding on to that I am.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Those are my questions.
And this idea of asking, what is your personal experience of this? There's no such thing as a personal experience of this, because this is going beyond the person that we seem to be. The more we hold on to I am, the more the ego that is aware of itself as I am this person subsides. So we're going beyond all these limitations of ego and person and so on.
So to summarize, Michael, I think Bhagavan's picture does help, and his Nama Rupa does help to help us turn within, right?
Yes,
and use it as a proper an aid.
Yes, but it's an aid. It's only an aid.
Exactly, that's all I'm saying, right? Just an aid, as an aid to help us turn within. From all the questions, I think, could you just explain to everyone here what exactly the technique of or the practice of self-investigation entail? I think it's good to revisit this, and I know we explained this many times.
Okay.
Okay,
firstly, I don't think technique is an appropriate word for it, because a technique is, if you have something difficult to do, Supposing you're trying to, nowadays when we buy things in the supermarket, some things come in bottles. Sometimes it's very difficult to open the bottle. So for a difficult thing like that, you may need to find some technique, some way of gripping the top. So for that, you need a technique. But you need a technique to see something. To see it, you just need to turn towards it and look at it.
Right.
So in order to see what we actually are, we simply need to turn towards ourselves and look at ourselves. Obviously, we cannot look at ourselves with our physical eyes, because what we actually are is not something physical. It's something that is, it's beyond all, it's not an object or a phenomenon. It's what is ever shining in our heart as our own being, I am. So what self-investigation actually is has been very, very clearly expressed by Bhagavan in the 16th paragraph of ṇeṇmaṉa. That is, the name Atma Vichara is only for, it's a name for keeping the mind on ourselves, always keeping the mind on ourselves. Sada kalamum manate atma vil vetirapatikutan atma vicharam endrupaya. So that name Atma Vichara is a name only for this, keeping our mind on ourselves. What does it mean to keep your mind on something? It means to attend to it. So being self-attentive alone is self-investigation. What is self-attentiveness? The only way to find out what is self-attentiveness is to try to attend to ourselves. At first, it won't be so clear because we're so used to taking ourselves to be this body and mind. But if we read Bhagavan's teachings attentively, that is, Sravana, Manana, Nididhyasana. What does Sravana mean? The literal meaning of Sravana is hearing, but what it means is attentively studying Bhagavan's teaching, paying close attention to his words, what he's actually saying, putting our own preconceptions out of our mind, trying to understand what is it Bhagavan is saying here. So we need to pay close attention to his teachings. We need to also make sense of them, because his teachings they're just words. We need to make sense of those words. What is it that Bhagavan is saying? So we need to think carefully about it. What Bhagavan is saying here? Why does he say this here and that there? What is the connection between the different things? Slowly, slowly, we begin to make sense of his teachings. That is the maṇana. But the most important of all is the nididhyasana. Only a little bit of Sravana and Manana is necessary to get us started. With a little bit of Sravana, a little bit of careful Manana, we can understand what we have to attend to is just ourselves. Then we should start attending to ourselves. The more we attend to ourselves, the deeper will be our Sravana and Manana. Because when we read Bhagavan's words, they'll be more meaningful to us. It's just like if you see a map of a country you've never been to, you will understand these contour lines means it's a hill here, and there's a valley here, and there's a river here, and a city here. We understand generally the features, but we don't really, that map doesn't really enable us to know that country. But when we go to the country, start traveling around the country, start seeing the features that are represented on the map becomes much more meaningful to us. Likewise, the deeper we go in this practice, the more meaningful Bhagavan's words will become. And because of the clarity we gain from going within, we'll be able to, our maṇana will also be much deeper. We'll be able to understand more deeply, not only the surface meaning of what Bhagavan is saying, but the implication underneath it. That is, words, Bhagavan's words have both the surface meaning and the implication. For example, the two verses we took today, if we just take the surface meaning of the words, then that says, God is what knows the mind. But is God what knows the mind? God is the reality of what knows the mind. What knows the mind is ego. God is the reality of that. So we need to go beneath the surface of the words to understand not just what the words mean, but what they imply. In every verse of Bhagavan's, I mean, these are translated verses, so these are not so important, but particularly the original verses of Bhagavan, in every verse, there's the surface meaning. We need to understand what it means, what the words actually mean. But we shouldn't stop with just the meaning of the words. We need to begin to understand what they imply. The implications will become clearer and clearer the more we put this into practice. So the practice is absolutely essential. But nobody can do this practice for us. Nobody can. That is, Bhagavan's words are pointing out. They're pointing us in the right direction. They're pointing us back. They're pointing our attention back towards ourselves. But we need to turn our attention back towards ourselves in order to see what he's pointing at. If Bhagavan's pointing at something behind us, if we continue looking at Bhagavan and don't look behind at what he's pointing at, we're missing, we won't ever see what he's pointing out. So his outward form has come to point out what lies deep within us. Because what he actually is not that outward form. He is what lies deep within. He, out of his abundant grace and compassion, he has appeared outwardly in name and form in order to tell us to look within. But if we are to be benefited from his teachings, we need to follow them. We need to look within to see what we actually are.
So, Michael, what exactly is looking within?
Fixing your mind in yourself, as Bhagavan says. But words can go only so far. Words can only point, but we cannot. It's recorded in Mahayoga and in talks. When someone asked Bhagavan, but how to do this? Bhagavan said, if the way were objective, it could be shown objectively. This is not objective. You need to be shown the way inside your own home. That is why he called this vichara. Vichara means investigation. So we can find out what it is to be self-attentive only by trying to be self-attentive. Otherwise, the words will be meaningless to us.
Right. So that's why when I first posed the question, I corrected the technique to practice.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So, then that is.
But why is practice necessary? Why shouldn't we just look within and see what we actually are? Because of the strength of our outward going inclinations, our vishaya vasanas and resulting desires and attachments and so on. So if we were fully ripe, the mere words of Bhagavan would turn our attention back within and we would merge back it within. But most of us are not so ripe. So practice is necessary. We need to continue trying more and more. But practice means just trying to turn our attention within as much as possible. The more we do so, the more the sattvasana, the inclination to hold on to our being, will be strengthened. The love to hold on to our being will be strengthened. And all the other vasanas, the vishaya vasanas, will be correspondingly weakened. So practice is absolutely essential. There are many would-be gurus nowadays who try and make it appear that practice isn't necessary. All you need to do is to see it as it is. But how can you see it as it is if you don't do the practice? Why they say practice isn't necessary? Because they're trying to sell a product in a marketplace. So you have to make it sound as easy and as attractive as possible. So they say, but practice isn't necessary. There's even one very prominent person who is supposed to be teaching Advaita. He has started to say of late that Bhagavan taught Atmavichara just as a concession. But that's not Bhagavan's highest teaching. That's not his real teaching. Why is he saying that? Just to make it popular with people. Bhagavan's core teaching, what Bhagavan's teachings are all about, is about looking within to see what we actually are. So self-investigation is the very heart of Bhagavan's teachings. So anyone who tries to make it sound like this is not necessary or this is just a concession for those who want to do something, they are completely missing the point. But if you're running a business, if you're trying to earn pots and pots of money, charging for people to view your videos and all these, and to come to your retreats and your satsangs and everything, you need to have a good business model. You've got to make sure your product is going to appeal to the popular market. This is what is happening nowadays with so many people. They're diluting the teachings, these neo-Advaitins and others. They're diluting the teachings in order to have something that will be popular to market. Bhagavan's teachings will never be popular. It'll only be a few people who, at any given time, who are ready to come to this path, who are serious about coming to this path. So we're not here to popularize Bhagavan's teachings. We're here, well, ultimately, we're each here to turn within and merge within. If at all we talk about Bhagavan's teachings, we should talk about Bhagavan's teachings only to those who actually ask us and who are really, really interested. Bhagavan never asked us to talk about his teachings or spread his teachings. I'm the one who's always talking about his teachings, but this is not what Bhagavan's teachings are about. It just so happened because people ask me questions, I give answers and so on. But this is not the real thing. The real thing is only looking within. We can go on talking about these things ad infinitum for all eternity, but it's all useless if we don't turn within. All Bhagavan's teachings are useful to the extent to which we put them into practice. If we don't put them into practice, we are completely, we are wasting the supremely precious opportunity we've been given. In the Bhagavan, in the 12th paragraph of ṇeṇmaṉa, Bhagavan says, God and Guru are in truth not different. Just like what has fallen in the jaws of a tiger cannot escape, those who have been caught in the glance of Guru's grace will certainly be saved by him and will never be forsaken. Eninum Guru Kartiya Varipadi Tabaradu Nadikavendam. Nevertheless, it is necessary to follow without fail in accordance with the path shown by Guru. So Bhagavan has assured us that he will certainly save us. But well, one thing we have to do, we have to follow his path. So practice is all important. What is it we are to practice? Trying to turn our attention back within to see who am I. That is what his teachings are all about.
Thank you, Michael. So, and then there is a comment here. The only graceful act of ego is turning within, and from there surrender to Bhagavan's grace for abundance in the light of awareness that resides in the cave of the heart.
Yes, absolutely.
Right. And then Bruce sort of reinforces your point. You need someone to show your way into your own house.
Bhagavan says you don't need someone.
Right.
You just need, Bhagavan has told us, go inside your own house. If we say, but Bhagavan, how can I go inside my own house? You know your own house, go inside, Bhagavan is saying to us.
Right. And then, let me see, there are a lot of comments from Miraka. Did you have any additional comments? What were you saying? Go ahead. You can unmute yourself, please.
No, I wrote something in the very end.
Yeah, summarize your point.
The very end, I wrote something. If you wanted to just read that, because you might be shorter. The very, very end. Last. Too many questions from me today. Sorry.
So Satchit I is the truth that exists always. Is this correct?
No, to find that which does not undergo any change, to look within, to find out in us, what is it that does not undergo any change? What is it that exists always? What is it that has no attributes? What is it that is self-evident? Like, I know I exist without anybody telling me I exist.
Yes.
So
Swayam Prakasa, self-shining.
Yeah, I don't need my sense organs to tell me. Like ego
Yes.
needs a sense organs to tell anything of the world. If I have to see,
Yes.
I need my, I perceive using the five
Yes.
senses. But to
Yes.
know I exist, I don't need anyone to tell me. I don't need any of my sense organs. So
Yeah.
that is an independent knowing in me. So that such is that aspect in me, which exists always in the waking state, dream state, and deep sleep. So that's the truth of me. And that such I has no attributes. So because there's no attribute, there is no comparison side effects, which the ego undergoes during the waking state of comparison, and all problems and everything happens in life. Now this such has no comparison side effects. So it's happiness. When there's no comparison, 90% of the problem is gone in life. And the ego gets a pat on the back for every action that we do, and the ego rises more and more, it becomes stronger. And all that will not be there once we know I am is at such it, not the ego. So the action still can be done using the body without the doership, isn't it? That is my question.
You don't have to do actions.
But how do we survive in the world?
Avarava prarabdha prakaram adakanavan angangirindu artavipan. Bhagavan has said very clearly in the first sentence of the note he wrote for his mother. Avarava prarabdha prakaram means according to the prarabdha, in accordance with the prarabdha of each one, adakanavan. Adakanavan is a beautiful word. It means he who is for that. He's referring, of course, to God or Guru. Angangirandu, being there. That means being in each place. That implies being in the heart of each one of us. Artavipan will make us dance. So whatever actions need to be done by our mind, speech, or body, in order for our prarabdha to unfold, that's what he means by avarava prarabdha prakaram, he will make us do these actions.
Oh, okay. So it's like a total surrender. Got it.
We don't have to do anything.
Yep.
Of course, we are free to do, as he says in the next two sentences, Endrum naduvadadu, envi chikanum naduvadu. That is, what is never to happen will not happen in spite of any amount of effort. Why does he say in spite of any amount of effort? Because we are free to want to experience what is not in prarabdha. We're free to try for it. But however much we want it, however much we try for it, if it is not to happen, it is not going to happen. Likewise, ṇāṛpadu eṇṭhārasayinum ņiḷḷadu. What is to happen will not stop in spite of any amount of obstacle. So we're free to want to avoid what we're destined to experience. We're free to try to avoid it. But however much we try, we cannot avoid it. It is to be iduve tinnam. This is certain. So Bhagavan has in this, the whole of the law of karma, Bhagavan has packed into this one short note that he wrote for his mother. Iduve tinnam. And what is his conclusion? āhaiyāl, maunamai irake nandru. Therefore, being silent is good. What does he mean by being silent? Being silent means not rising as ego. So if we don't rise as ego, mind and body will be made to do what they would anyway be made to do. Because that's in accordance with prarabdha. We will be untouched by it because we're not rising. So some people think, oh, Bhagavan says you have to be silent, so you have to just sit like a rock. No, it's not the body that has to be silent.
Right.
It is ego that has to be silent. Ego shouldn't, the non-rising as ego alone is what Bhagavan describes as maunamai irake.
Thank you.
Being silently or being as silence.
Yeah. Thank you.
Silence is the non-rising of ego.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Michael. So there's a couple more questions.
Right.
Wrap it up. So Raja Kalwa is asking, is remaining as I always, does it entail ceasing from day-to-day actions of life?
What are doing the everyday actions of life? It's mind, speech, and body. Whatever mind, speech, and body may be doing, you always remain as I. You cannot be anything other than I. But what is meant by remaining as I is we are always I, but when we rise as ego, we don't remain just as I. We mix and conflate along with this I am this body, I am Raja, I am Michael, I am whoever. This rising takes place. So when Bhagavan talks about remaining as I, what he means is not rising as I, just being I. Right? The I that rises is ego. The I that is Atma-swarupa, our own real nature. So that the pure awareness is the real I, the being I. Ego is the rising I. So in order to remain as we actually are, we need to just be without rising.
So
that's the meaning of
summa
summa irripadu.
Actions. Sorry. So it doesn't have anything to do with the day-to-day actions of life.
It's got nothing to do with day-to-day
Yeah,
actions.
exactly.
Day-to-day actions are done by whom? By mind, speech, and body.
Yeah.
But that creates prarabdha, isn't it? Sorry to
Hold on,
interrupt you.
Mia, please. Yeah, let him start.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is, these actions are done by mind, speech, and body. Let the mind, speech, and body do whatever actions they need to do. That's no concern of ours. We are not this body, speech, or mind. We need, that is the whole point of turning within, is to detach ourselves from this body, speech, and mind.
So it's an important question, because it's got nothing to do with our day-to-day actions or work.
Nothing whatsoever.
Right.
That's why Bhagavan never advocated any particular way of life. He never said you have to become a sannyasi or you have to become a grahastha and everything. He said all that is decided by prarabdha. That's irrelevant. I mean, whatever is most conducive for your spiritual development has already been allotted in your prarabdha. If it's your prarabdha to be a sannyasi, you cannot avoid being a sannyasi, even if you want to avoid it. If it's your prarabdha to be a householder, that alone is what's going to happen. You cannot avoid what is destined to happen. We shouldn't be concerned about these things.
Right.
The only thing we should be concerned about is about being what we actually are. Being what we actually are means holding on to our being, holding on to I am, and thereby not rising as ego.
Thank you, Michael.
Of course, it's much easier to say this when they actually put it into practice, but that is our aim.
Right.
We are failing. All of us are failing in this all the time, but we need to keep on trying. If we keep on trying, doesn't matter how many times we fail, eventually we will succeed. Bhagavan has given us that guarantee. He will certainly save us and never abandon us, he says in that 12th paragraph of ṉeṇṇā. But we need to follow unfailingly in the path he has shown us.
Right. Thank you, Michael. So there is a questioner who wants to be anonymous. Is it not limiting God to say God does not see anything in our ego world? How does God ensure karma then and see the true intent behind thoughts or actions?
Okay. To say God sees anything would be limiting God. Because as Bhagavan says in the fourth verse of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, Uruvam tānayin ulhu paramatran. If oneself is a form, the world and God will be likewise. If oneself is not a form, who can see their forms and how? So in order to know anything other than ourselves, we need to limit ourselves. Because if I know something other myself, that thing is other, I am other, so I'm limited. So God is infinite. So since God is infinite, he cannot know any finite things. He only knows the infinite reality. So in a sense, God is knowing everything in that he is knowing the underlying reality of everything. But we know this appearance. God doesn't know the appearance, he knows the reality. So it is not limiting God. To say he knows the appearance would be limiting him. That's the first thing. That's talking about God as he actually is. But when we talk about God allotting the fruits of karma, it seems to us that we are giving a role to God. We're giving work to God. God has to sit there scratching his head thinking, okay, what fruit is appropriate for this action? What fruit is appropriate for that action? He would have to be a supercomputer to work out all these things, because there are so many jivas doing so many actions all the time. And to keep a tab on all these things, God is not like that. God is not a supercomputer. God is just pure being. But by just being as he is, all these things happen as they're meant to happen. That is, Bhagavan has hinted at this beautifully in the 15th paragraph of ṉeṇmaṉa, where he talks about the 5 divine functions, the Panchakritya. Panchakrityas means creation, sustenance, dissolution of the whole universe, the creation of the universe, the sustenance of the universe, and the dissolution of the universe. Veiling and grace. Veiling means, in order for all this to appear, our real nature needs to be, we need to see ourselves as something other than what we actually are. So that is the veiling. And the grace, the anugraha, is the removing of the veiling, and therefore the permanent dissolution of everything. So all these 5 divine functions, Bhagavan says, are happening isan sanidhana visesha matratal, by the mere special nature of the presence of God. That is, God doesn't, and he also says in that paragraph very clearly, not even a single karma touches God. That means God is not affected by any karma. He's not doing any karma. He is just being as he is. But by his being as he is, everything is made to happen as it's meant to happen. So God doesn't do anything. God is just pure being. But by being as but the very being of God is pure love. So by just being the pure love he actually is, automatically all these things happen as they're meant to happen.
Right. Thank you, Michael.
So in a sense, yes, God knows everything, but he doesn't know everything as we know it. We know everything as all this multiplicity. God knows it as it actually is, which is a pure being himself. So God's knowledge of everything is far deeper, far clearer than our knowledge, because he doesn't see it as many things. He sees it as the one thing that actually exists, namely himself.
So it's not that we're not saying it, when you say he doesn't know things, it's basically not the way we know things.
Yes. That is, he knows everything we know, but he doesn't know it as we know it.
Right.
We know it as all this multiplicity. He knows it as I am.
Right.
He knows it as one. We know it as many.
Right.
He knows everything because he knows the only thing.
And then last question, which actually you answered in the most recently released video. However, I'll go ahead and ask it, in case you want to add any insights to it, or you could explain the whole thing. Who is the one that is practicing, who is surrender, or it can entail anything, the ego or the mind? The question is, who is the one that is practicing? The ego?
Ourself as ego. That is, all the problems are only for ourselves. It's only when we rise as ego we have problems. In sleep, we don't rise as ego, we have no problems. So there's no need to practice anything, and there's no one in sleep to practice anything. All problems are only for ego. And we can, so it's ego that needs to investigate and find out what it is. Who is it who doesn't, who is it who knows itself as I am this body? It is ego. So ego needs to investigate itself to see who am I, see what it actually is. What it actually is nothing but the pure I. I am I. That is the ultimate truth. Not I am this or I am that. Even I am Brahman is not ultimately true, because there are no two things, I am Brahman. There is only I. That is the very purpose of the Mahavakyas, is to make us understand that there's no such thing as Brahman other than I. So all we need to meditate on is to meditate on I. Brahma Dhyana, meditation on Brahman, is not meditating on some idea of Brahman. It's meditating on what Brahman actually is. What Brahman actually is I. and nothing but I.
Thank you, Michael. Okay, last question, for which there is no real answer, but I will ask. Nagendra asks, why is there this creation?
To whom is this? Who says there is a creation? It is ourself as ego. So long as we rise as ego, there seems to be a creation. So let us first, before trying to know what is known, let us first try to know the knower. If we don't even know the knower, whatever we know about the known is going to be false. So scientists are busy doing so much research on this world. It's fine. I mean, that's fine from a Vivaharika point of view. We need science and all these things, but are they ever going to find the truth? No, because what they are investigating is the appearance. They are not investigating to whom does it appear. To me, who am I? So we need to know the knower. Bhagavan says in the third verse of Anmavidde, he says, Tanne aridal indri, pinne edu arihil en. That means, without knowing oneself, if one knows whatever else, so what? That is, what is the benefit of knowing other things if we don't even know ourselves? Without knowing the knower, whatever knowledge we have, without knowing the reality of the knower, whatever knowledge we have is open to question. Because if our knowledge of ourselves is a wrong knowledge, whatever we know about other things, we're knowing through the filter of this wrong knowledge that we have of ourselves. Now we know ourselves as I am this body. That is a wrong knowledge of ourselves. So whatever we know through the filter of this false awareness, I am this body, is also going to be false. So without knowing oneself, if one knows whatever else, what? It's literally what it means. What here implies so what? What's the benefit? How reliable is such knowledge when we don't even know ourselves? And then he goes on to say, Tanne arindidil pin aria enne uڵḷadu. If one has known oneself, then what exists to know? That is, if we know ourselves as we actually are, there is nothing else for us to know, is the implication. So knowing about creation, let us leave that till afterwards. Let us first find out about ourselves. If we know about ourselves, then we can see whether there's any creation to worry about. Sometimes people used to put this same question in another way, because Bhagavan said creation appears only in the view of ego. Then people would say, okay, Bhagavan, why did this ego come into existence? Then Bhagavan said, first you go and find this ego. When you find the ego, bring it here. Then we can find out how it came into existence. If you go looking for ego, you will never find any such thing. Because as soon as you begin to seek it, tēdiṇāl otam pidikam. As soon as you begin to look for it, it will run away. We seem to be ego only so long as we're looking outside. If we look within, has anyone ever seen ego? There's no such thing as to be found, because we seem to be ego only when we don't look at ourselves. When we look at ourselves, there's no ego, there's only pure awareness. Because so if we look for ego, the one to whom all this creation seems to exist, we will find there's no such thing as ego at all. When there's no ego, there's also no creation. There is only Satchit, nothing but Satchit, I am.
May I just ask one line
yes.
question? When you say look at ourselves, is that like an understanding? It's looking?
Not understanding is something we need the intellect to understand things, but it's more than understanding. It's seeing ourselves as we actually are. Of course, it's not literally seeing, but that's the closest. It's being aware of ourselves as we actually are.
Thank you.
It's a state of pure awareness. So it's beyond understanding. Many of the lecturers of classical Advaita, they talk about understanding by studying all these Upanishads and Brahma Sutra and Bhagavad Gita and all the commentaries upon them. You need to understand, but it's not merely a matter of understanding. However much we understand, we're still functioning through the intellect. We need to actually see what we need to actually be aware of ourselves as we actually are.
Aware of. Okay, thank you.
When it is said in classical Advaita, but the problem is avidya, and the solution is vidya. That is, the problem is ignorance, and ignorance can be removed only by knowledge. All the lecturers on classical Advaita, they will all say this time and time again, but they don't really understand what it means. Firstly, Bhagavan said, there's no such thing as avidya other than ego. Avidya is itself ego, because you cannot have ignorance without something that is ignorant. So the problem is that what is it that is ignorant? It is ego. Why is ego called avidya? Because ego is a false awareness of ourselves. Avidya doesn't mean not knowing ourselves, because we always know ourselves. We always know I am. But ego means knowing ourselves wrongly, knowing ourselves as I am this or I am that. That is avidya. So
it is an intellectual misunderstanding.
It's
creating emotional problem.
Yes. But it's a misunderstanding. So, but that's why Bhagavan came to point out what is the practical implication of all of the Advaita. Why in the Upanishads is it said you are that? Not to go on about to go on what is that? What is I? And how is I that? And it's not all that. When they say you are that, the aim of Upanishads in saying you are that is to make us turn our attention back to ourselves, to see what am I? Who am I? Yeah. But that is missed by people. So they say that so they take avidya to be something other than ego, and they think that by accumulating knowledge, by studying all these things and gaining understanding, they can remove avidya. But who is understanding? It's only ego, which is itself avidya. So how can avidya remove itself by understanding anything? Ego needs to turn within to see what it actually is. If it sees what it actually is, it will lose itself in what it actually is, because ego is nothing but the false awareness, I am this body. When we turn within to see what we actually are, the body will drop down and the pure I am alone will remain. When we see ourselves as that pure awareness I am, ego is thereby destroyed and the pure awareness I am alone remains. So vidya is nothing but the pure awareness I am. Avidya is nothing but the false awareness I am this body. To remove the false awareness, we who now experience ourselves as I am this body need to see ourselves as we actually are, as the pure awareness I am. That is why the correct practice of Advaita is who am I? Who am I means fixing our attention on ourself alone. Sada kalamam manate armabil vetirubhutan atma vichara mendrupaya. The name Atma Vichara refers to, or is for, keeping our mind on, always keeping our mind on ourselves. That is what the practice is. That is what Advaita is all about. We can say it in another way. What is the correct practice of Advaita? Advaita means not two, one only without a second. So the only correct practice of Advaita can be self-attentiveness, because attending to anything other than ourselves, attending to the Upanishads, attending to the commentaries, attending to the Bhagavad Gita or the Brahma Sutra, attending to the all that we learn from that, that's all anya. We're attending to something other than ourselves. Only when we attend to nothing other than ourselves, ananya bhava, as Bhagavan calls it in verse 8 of Upadesha, that alone is true Advaita Abhyasa. Because in self-attentiveness, there are no two things. What is attending and what is being attended to are one and the same. And the attention by which it's attending is also the same thing. We are that. So this alone, what Bhagavan has shown is alone the true practice of Advaita.
So,
Thank you,
So
Michael.
if you want to know Advaita, you need not read the Upanishads, you need not read the Brahma Sutra, you need not even read the Bhagavad Gita, you need not read any commentary. You need to read Bhagavan's teachings, but even reading Bhagavan's teachings is not sufficient. You need to put Bhagavan's teachings into practice. Then only you will understand what is true Advaita. So the beauty of Bhagavan's teachings is he has highlighted what is the practical implication of the core teachings of Advaita. When we understand the practical teaching of the practical implication of the core teachings of Advaita, 99.999% of Advaita Sastras become redundant, because all that matters is the practice. And in order to help us persevere in this practice, the only support we need is Bhagavan's own original writings. Arunachal Stuti Panchakam, Upadeshundiya, Uڵḷadu Nāṛpadu Nāṇa, Āhumē, etc. These are all the support we need on our inward journey.
right.
So Bhagavan has given us everything that is required.
Right. Bhagavan's teaching is the practical aspect of Advaita.
Yes. And Advaita is nothing if it's not practical. But
Exactly.
Bhagavan's teachings are pure Advaita.
Right.
Because Advaita without practice is not Advaita at all. It's just a set of nice ideas.
Right.
And ideas is not Advaita. Ideas is multiplicity. Advaita means one only without a second. So we alone are Advaita. There cannot be any second thing.
Remember Swami Sadhu mentioning somewhere that Advaita is an anubhava.
Yes, yes,
It's an experience,
yes,
not some theoretical construct.
yes.
So yes,
But even anubhava, we need to understand what is meant by an anubhava. It's not like one thing experiencing another thing. That
It
is,
is being
Advaita
that.
means the one thing must experience itself alone.
right. It's being that.
Yeah.